Hello, welcome to today's episode of Random Thoughts. We are glad that you are with us today. Well, we're continuing our conversation on the sanctity of life. Last episode, we took a look at the beginning of life. Today, we're going to be looking at the sanctity of life kind of that movement from beginning through early age, middle age, end of age, until the end of this life on earth. However long that life may live. So we want to talk about how wonderful that life is and how set apart, sacred life is. We'll get into that today and here in our episode of Random Thoughts. We will be right back right after this. Well, welcome back. Life is sacred. Life is wonderful. Life is set apart. Life is this wonderful creation that is of God. We talked about that in our previous episode about the beginnings of life. And in the beginnings of life, we have this wonderful creation that God has made. And also, as David records in Psalm 51, he says, "In sin my mother conceived me." Now, was David's mother in a relationship that wasn't with David's father and she had a child outside of marriage in sin? That's an old phrase and an old figure of speech. No, that's not what that means. What that means is I was conceived, even though the conception is a miracle, the conception is wonderful, sin has a way of being in that conception. So in other words, we as human beings, the production of a miracle of procreation also is sinful. It's a unique theological conundrum that can only really be solved by using the phrase both and. What do I mean by that? We are both a wonderful creation of God, and in the context of conception, in the very beginning of the life, there is sin in this world. We are set apart. We are set against God. In the context of conception, we are not connected to God. Only by faith are we reconnected back to God. Only by faith and trust in the salvation that God gave to us in Jesus Christ are we reconnected to God, or, to use another phrase, born again. So, even as a sinfully conceived, meaning into the condition of sin conceived people, we are still sacred. We are still set apart. We are still special, unique, wonderful creations of God. It's the only way to solve that conundrum. We are created by God, and we are also sinful from God. And that's where a lot of problems with life come into play. We are in this theological conundrum that we are both sacred and sinful. We're sacred because we are a creation, a unique, miraculous creation. And at the same time, we are sinful people. And that creates these problems, as I alluded to earlier. What problems are created? Well, part of the problem is life. If life isn't that sacred, life can be taken. If it is, like, for example, your life is not as important as my life. So therefore, your life is of no consequence. Life can be taken. It also deals with the context of racism. Way back in the early stages of our country, when our country was beginning to be formed, they were struggling with the slavery issue. Was a slave a piece of property? They were treated as such. And so they came up with some kind of solution, mathematically, at least in the beginnings, that a slave, you can look it up, I don't remember whether or not it was 1/2 of a person or 2/3 of a person. But racism comes from this lack of connectivity to God. And when we have this lack of connectivity to God, we have this lack of value to a person's life. Murder. My life is more important. Yeah, I'll take your life before you take mine kind of thing. There's a lot more to that, obviously, than just that. But for the sake of brevity, that's where we're going. The challenge of life, and we'll get to it in our next video, the challenge of life not only is how do I live my life right now, but what about end of life issues? If life is sacred, why do we not treat life as special at the end as we do in the middle? If life is sacred, why do we have assisted suicides? Why do we have suicide? Do we think our life is wonderful enough that I think, my life's not worth anything, I might as well just end it? Your life is worth something. Your life is worth something that Jesus came and died for you to take away your sins. If you're contemplating end-of-life issues, realize this: you are sacred and set apart enough that God would save you. You have value. You are a person because Jesus came and saved you and gave you a life. There's so many more issues that I could deal with and talk about, but we're just scratching the surface. Any comments, please comment below. There's just so much. But for today, wrapping this up, we are wonderful creations of God, for certain. We are also inbred sinfulness, which means we are apart from God and left to our own devices because of ourselves and we can go back to Adam and Eve for that. And we are special enough that Jesus came to save us, to save you, to give his life for yours, to be the sacrifice for the sake of taking away your sin and giving you a new life so that you are born again in God's eyes and God's life, so that you can see life in its wondrousness, you can see life in its joy and peace, what life really is all about. So next time we will start talking about the end of life issues and the past end of life sanctity of life. We'll look into that as well. Looking forward to seeing you next time. Also looking forward to seeing you on Sunday morning as we continue to prepare for the arrival of Jesus, both at his birth and his return. Are you ready? That's a plug. So, looking forward to doing that. If you like our video, please give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and we will see you very soon. Bye-bye.